The name's Bob. Computer Bob. Happy New Year and welcome back to another video. Emulation has been a popular request, so in this video I'll be emulating some of my personal console game collection on the Fujitsu with the AMD R5 430 2GB GPU. All clips were recorded from emulated games running on the Fujitsu system. Let's travel back to 1997 when Nintendo released the Nintendo 64 and Rare published this blinder that was a must-have for N64 owners. Right now it's running as it would have been rendered on the N64, but emulators let us improve the experience by running games at a higher resolution with better anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering. The emulators we will be using are Nintendo 64, Project 64, Sega Dreamcast, Demul, Sony PlayStation 2, PPSSPP, Nintendo GameCube and Wii, Dolphin, Sony PlayStation Portable, PPSSPP, Sony PlayStation 3, RPCS3. Here's a quick rundown of the specifications of the Fujitsu. The CPU has been upgraded to an i5 6500, so we now have 4 cores and 4 threads, as opposed to 2 cores, 4 threads with the i3 6100. This will improve titles that like more cores, but we could see a decrease in some titles that prefer faster single-core performance as our clock speeds are lower. Future Bob here. I've come back from the future to quickly talk about frame rates. Nearly all the consoles we're looking at were designed to display on a cathode ray tube television. In the UK, the standard is PAL, which refreshes at 50 Hz, and very often game developers would lock the frame rate to 50 or 25 FPS. Some later games added a 60 Hz mode, allowing up to 60 FPS, but here in GoldenEye the FPS is locked to 50. First up is GoldenEye, released in 1997, running at 1080p with 8x MSAA and 16x AF, which is certainly an improvement. GoldenEye was a surprise hit on the N64 and paved the way for many more console first-person shooters. No GoldenEye, no Halo. The N64's analog controller, while not the first, was standard with the console and was soon copied by Sony, Sega and Microsoft. Playing GoldenEye again after at least 10 years, to me it felt clunky and awkward. Maybe that's just how I had my controller set up, but I won't be going back, preferring to leave GoldenEye in the 90s with the rest of my happy memories. We can see that GoldenEye is running OK with an average frame rate of 43.2 FPS. The 1% and 0.1% lows are not great though, with a 1% low of 14.9 FPS and a 0.1% low of 13 FPS. I might have been a bit too aggressive with the AA and AF settings, and it might be worth lowering these to hit a 50 FPS average frame rate with decent 1% lows. Being an N64 owner, I was jealous that my PlayStation owning friends got to play WipeOut, so was chuffed when WipeOut 64 was released in 1998. Well received at the time, it takes the best parts of WipeOut 2097 and blends them together. Going back, I'd forgotten it didn't have a Grand Prix mode and consists of a series of challenges. WipeOut 64 runs a little better than GoldenEye with an average frame rate of 49.9 FPS, a 1% low of 20.8 FPS and a 0.1% low of 19.8. Should be mostly smooth gameplay, but again dialing down the AA and AF would give better performance. Released in 1999, Force Gemini was one of the Nintendo 64's top-rated games. I came to it late after picking it up second-hand, and didn't progress far past the intro, having already moved on to the PS2. Playing it again on Project 64, I experienced some graphical glitches that probably could be fixed with tweaking the settings. A 90s control scheme meant having to hold a button to manually aim and just felt awkward. As with GoldenEye and WipeOut, I don't think I'll be revisiting Force Gemini. The N64 had its time, It was great, but now it feels dated, and should probably be fondly remembered in the past. In Jet Force Gemini we see an average frame rate of 49.1 FPS, but the 1% and 0.1% lows are the worst out of the 3 N64 titles tested. The 1% low of 14.7 FPS is only slightly worse than GoldenEye, but the 0.1% low of 5 FPS indicates some stuttering. You definitely want to drop settings on this title to bring these low values up. In 1999 Sega released the Dreamcast in the UK, a phenomenal machine that crashed and burned so badly Sega stopped making consoles. Expensive to produce and unable to hit sales targets due to Sony's imminent PlayStation 2, the console price was slashed until the losses were unsustainable. I picked up my Dreamcast long after launch from a second-hand shop for 40 Great British pounds to play Shenmue. We're taking a look at Sonic Adventure, which some may argue is the best 3D one. It was a launch title and really shows off how next-gen the Dreamcast was in 1999, and I would say still looks good today. In Sonic Adventure we see an average frame rate of 59.8 FPS, and a not absolutely terrible 1% low of 24.6. However, our 0.1% low is 3.5 FPS. While gameplay was mostly smooth, there are occasional stutters, so it might be worth lowering the settings to bring the 0.1% low up. SoulCalibur was another Dreamcast launch title. I remember playing this at a friend's house on the very day he got his Dreamcast. Good times. SoulCalibur can hit an average 60 FPS frame rate, and the 1% and 0.1% lows should be good enough for mostly smooth gameplay, although it may be a little jerky at times. Released in November 2000, the PS2 went on to become the best-selling console of all time. Shadow of the Colossus was released in 2005, although it wasn't until much later I picked up a copy second-hand. I played it on the PS3, but didn't have the heart to carry on killing the Colossi, so for me it remains unfinished. Emulated, it appears to have a speed issue, which made playing unpleasant. The benchmark for 720p shows a decent average frame rate with 39.6 FPS, a 1% low of 18.4 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 16. I'm sure the slowdown issue could be addressed with different settings, but I haven't tweaked them for this title. If you know the answer, let me know in the comments. Released in 2001. Oh, was it really over 20 years ago? Metal Gear Solid 2 was a must-have for many PS2 owners. Have I finished it? Yes. Did I understand it? No. Was I pissed Snake got replaced? Yes. Let's see how well it runs in emulation on the Fujitsu. Metal Gear Solid 2 runs at a decent rate on the Fujitsu, with the AMD R5 430 delivering an average frame rate of 49.6 FPS. The 1% low of 25 and the 0.1% low of 22.8 should just about keep gameplay smooth. The final PS2 title is God of War 2. Released in 2007, right just before the PS3 launched, it was a showcase for what the PS2 could do when it was really worked on. I think I enjoyed classic God of War more than the modern versions. Not that they're not good, but maybe it was just a simpler time. In God of War at 720p, the system delivers an average frame rate of 37 FPS, which is just about enough. The 1% low of 20.1 and the 0.1% low of 15.2 tell me that it's not going to be the smoothest experience, and it might be worth dropping the settings down a notch. It's-a me, Mario! The GameCube was released in 2001, but we were stuck playing Rebel Assault 2 until Super Mario Sunshine arrived in 2002. The widescreen fix in this emulator seems to cause graphical glitches, so we're enjoying all our GameCube games in 4:3. Super Mario Sunshine ran quite happily at 1080p, albeit with what appears to be a locked frame rate of 25 frames per second. Let's see what the benchmark says. At 1080p, the benchmark records an average FPS of 24.9 frames per second, with a 1% low of 23 FPS and a 0.1% low of 17.8 FPS. In my experience, it was perfectly playable, and if anyone knows how to fix the frame rate, please let me know in the comments. Released in 2004, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes was the sequel to Metroid Prime, which I loved, and after finishing picked this one up, but again somehow never got around to playing it. This game surprised me. I hadn't felt a burning desire to return to any of the games previously tested, but I will be playing Metroid Prime 2 again. I had to drop the resolution down to solve slowness issues and stuttering, which is a shame. In Metroid Prime 2 at just over 720p, we get an average frame rate of 59.6 FPS. Very nice, and a very good 1% low of 48.1 FPS. The 0.1% low drops to 7.3 FPS. I certainly don't remember any stuttering, but it's clearly there in the benchmark. Released in 2006, Twilight Princess was a Wii launch title, but this is the GameCube version, which was released a little later. I picked up my copy in a charity shop. I think the last Zelda game I actually finished was The Wind Waker, and I only have one boss left on Breath of the Wild. Running on the emulator, it looks like we have a 30 frames per second cap. Twilight Princess runs with an average frame rate of 29.9 FPS, with a 1% low of 19 FPS and a 0.1% low of 13.6 FPS. It wasn't the smoothest experience, but it was certainly playable. It's me again, Mario! Super Mario Galaxy was released in 2007 on the Wii, Nintendo's overclocked GameCube. I think the last Mario game I finished was Mario 64, which I borrowed from a friend back in the 90s. I'm quite far through Mario Odyssey though, promise. Mario titles tend to be less demanding, although it still looks great, and we were able to run Super Mario Galaxy with an average frame rate of 59 FPS. Good 1% and 0.1% lows mean we're getting nice smooth gameplay from our Fujitsu. Released in 2005, the PlayStation Portable kept me company when we actually had to travel to our place of work. Remember that? When we had to do that? Anyway, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker was released in 2010, and some consider this the best Metal Gear Solid game on Sony's portable console. Looks like the FPS is capped to 20 frames per second. I'm not sure if that's a PSP thing or an emulator thing. Benchmark results for Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker show a very tight result, with an average frame rate of 21.3 FPS, a 1% low of 19.2 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 17.5 FPS. Seemed very smooth when playing. Might actually charge my PSP to play this. Released in 2007, the PlayStation 3 was Sony's big, late, expensive console. Of course, I ponied up and bought one a few weeks after launch. Demon's Souls was released in 2009 and created a new genre of Souls-alike titles. My personal opinion? I'm not a fan of the genre. I did finish Demon's Souls thanks to a glitch that let me super level my character. It did get quite fun after that. I have to say, I was surprised. I thought performance would be way worse, and I didn't think my Fujitsu would perform as well as it did. It was just about playable in a low-resolution, jerky way, but not enjoyable. It seems we were CPU limited, as the i5 6500 struggles to emulate the PS3's 7-core, Q Dr. Evil, cores CPU. The benchmark results tell us what the video showed us. PS3 emulation is a bit too much for our system, with an average frame rate of just 17 FPS. The 1% low of 4.7 FPS and the 0.1% low of 2.7 FPS tell us we're going to have a bad experience playing PS3 games on this system. I do hope you enjoyed that. In this video we've shown that with an AMD R5 430 2GB in a modest former office PC, you can emulate consoles up to the 6th generation to play some of your old favourites. It's been fun to revisit the past, but I don't have any great desire to pick up any of the titles looked at again, apart from Metroid Prime 2 that is. Coming up this year, I'll be playing some of the best games from 2011 on a mid-range system from 2011 before seeing how it handles some modern titles. We'll also be taking a look at the GT 730 1GB and finding out if it's better than any of our Olin cards. That's all for now. Catch you later, Rammers. Bob out.